So I've got some opening words for us today from a Buddhist nun. Her name is Pema Chödrön. You may be familiar with Pema's work. She's in the Tibetan lineages, but she's an American nun, and she's the leader of a monastery in Nova Scotia. She's written many books, been on Oprah. She's quite a spiritual celebrity that way. And this is a reading from one of her books called The Wisdom of No Escape. Pema writes, "There is a story of a woman running away from tigers. She runs and runs, and the tigers are getting closer and closer. When she comes to the edge of a cliff, she sees that there are tigers below her as well. She climbs down and holds onto the vine, and looking down, sees the tigers. Then she notices that a mouse is gnawing away at the vine that she's holding on to. She also sees a beautiful bunch of strawberries next to her, growing out of a clump of grass. She looks up, she looks down, tigers above, tigers below. So she just takes a strawberry, puts it in her mouth, and enjoys it thoroughly." This is actually the predicament that we're always in terms of our life between birth and death. Each moment is just what it is. It might be the only moment of our life. It might be the only strawberry we'll ever eat. We could get depressed about it, or we could finally appreciate it and delight in the preciousness of every single moment of our lives.
That was a beautiful way to start our service with those words, and I know the Tibetan lineage is an important part of your background, and I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that. Thank you for choosing her, because I have not read as much about Pema Chödrön, but I have heard that piece before, and I hope that this morning is a little bit of that taste of strawberry for us, for everyone, and for setting us up into a nice couple years together. So the way we start this, and we have the last three, this is our third time now, is to start with kind of a very specific question around dialogue itself. Why are we doing these dialogues? But more specifically, what is dialogue? What is the power of dialogue? And why is that a form of communication that can be a helpful learning experience and a helpful connection experience too? So Judson, I'm going to pass it to you and ask you that question. Why dialogue? Why are you engaging with us today, besides me asking you? And just what do you see as the value of dialogue?
That's a good question. You know, I think so often when we're in these spaces of conversation, what's mirrored to us in the wider world right now is something like debate, and it's often, as you can see everywhere around us, it's super divisive, and it's super polarizing. And dialogue is really a tool for getting to know the other more deeply, without kind of diving into, well, this is my opinion as different from your opinion, but more about inquiry, about how do I understand you, how do I understand your context, how do I understand where you're coming from. I think dialogue invites a conversation about context, and it's super important to dive into conversations about context, because we all come from a different place. Even if we all agree on the same spiritual identities or political topics or whatever topic we're in, we still have a different context. So we'll all have a little different idea about how things are, and we'll see the world a little bit differently, no matter whether we agree or not. So
I really appreciate that idea of context and how much it is so uncommon for these types of dialogues to be happening compared to the social, political polarization that's happening right now. I mean, this is a very hard time to be optimistic about humanity, even though I know you are a diehard optimist, as am I. But it still can be difficult if you're just on Facebook or some other kind of social media platform for more than a minute. So the other hope I have is that these also model some of the ways that we can try and, again, move away from the edges of the extremes of emotions, where it's really hard to have to create connection when we're in our reptilian brains and when we're in a place of fight or flight. And even though that is kind of the world we're living in right now, it is so important to find that centering and that grounding. That is easier said than done, but something that we hope to model here today, and also create more platforms for spaces for everyone to practice in. So we're grateful for you all watching us dialogue, because again, we don't want this to be a two-person dialogue, and at the end we're going to have some time for comments and conversation. And every Sunday really is a dialogue, even if the sermon is more kind of talking, and then the dialogue continues in coffee hour, it continues in other meetings and other situations. So please do be thinking about kind of how is this landing for you, and what might your answers be to some of these same questions. So the second element we often have in these conversations in the first part is something we call a high five, which is, yes, a little kind of gimmicky. Yeah, because we want more high fives than, fists. But it's also this idea of naming some sort of question that gets us talking, both of us, around some list of five, around a prompt. And so the one that we came up with was one that we think that both of us have been thinking a lot about, and one that we might have different perspectives on because we have different contexts and different roles. And all of you may or may not be thinking so much about this internship, because you might still be kind of figuring out, what does it mean to have an intern? We haven't had an intern since 2013, and many of you weren't here in 2013. And so it's not like something we have every single time. So what's the unique situation that an internship provides? And here's the question that we're going to answer now. What are 5 hopes you have for this internship? What are 5 hopes you have for this internship? So we're just going to switch off, and we're going to talk about some of our hopes for this internship, which again is for the next 2 kind of academic years till the spring of 2027. So what hopes do you have for this internship, Judson?
Well, the first one is kind of the meta overarching hope, which is to develop a clearer understanding of congregational life, so as to inform me as to whether or not congregational life is my call as a minister. I was raised in the Episcopalian church, but I kind of dropped out of attending, in my early teens, and then sort of became a spiritual seeker and dabbled in lots of different traditions until I found my way to a tradition that would accept me as a spiritual leader with a plural background. So Unitarian Universalism is definitely a right fit for me, because at the core of me, I'm a pluralist. I've gotten as much out of being in a sweat lodge ceremony called an Inipi ceremony with the Lakota people as I have sitting on a meditation cushion in a Buddhist hall, as I have gotten here in a church. And so all of these spaces have been very impactful for me. And there's a piece there for me about pluralism where I love it, because what happens for me when I engage in many different traditions is that I begin to sort of cross-reference and look for the common things, look for the places where we're all seeking the same thing. It really emboldens, for me, a sense of shared humanity to be a pluralist. But I'm still not quite vocationally sure if I'm supposed to be preaching every Sunday in a congregation, or if I'm supposed to be working in a nonprofit, or where I'm supposed to kind of locate myself professionally. So that's goal 1, is to sort of sort that out.
I love that discernment, that figuring out internally what you have. And so I think similarly, I think we all have something we're trying to figure out. This year, next year, every year of our life. And so my hope, one of my hopes, is that we all think of ourselves as interns in a way, including me. Because there is something Intern-All that we're all kind of chewing on. Wait a minute.
Nick Cable, ladies and gentlemen, he'll be here all week.
I thought there was a better sound effect. But internal, we all have internal work that we're working on, okay? And there's something that we need to be doing on the inside. And so again, Judson's just doing it more vulnerably by identifying himself as an intern. But all of us, in a way, are working through some sort of idea of who am I and what are my beliefs on the inside. And then the other part of doing an internship is another term, an externship, because there's something external that we would like to do, all of us. And so that integrity work between the insides and the outsides of our lives is something that Judson models, but it's also something I hope we don't get mixed up and say, oh, he's the only one doing this these next 2 years. What else for you, Judson?
You know, I've been living in Scandinavia for the last 14 years, 15 years, and and that's been an incredible journey. And Sweden and most of the Scandinavian nations are intensely secular. There's not a lot of religion there. And sort of the idea of spirituality is, you know, sort of like if you're talking about spirituality, people are kind of like, yeah, maybe you're a little culty, you know. They really are not in for it as much as we are here in the States, I guess. And so as such, some of my personal practice has sort of fallen by the wayside. So I really want to re-engage a relationship to the Lakota hoop that I used to practice with when I lived here in the States. I want to re-engage a formal relationship with those folks. That's one thing. And then I'd like to do something that I've never done this as a Buddhist person. You could locate me as Buddhist, as a near Buddhist, as an almost Buddhist. I've never taken what's called refuge vows, which is where you really kind of commit yourself to a study of the Dharma. And you do that when you have a particular teacher. And this is something that I really, on personal practice level, it's those two things I really want to engage while I'm in this internship.
I love that. And I want to build off a practice. I like going second because I'm just like, hey, I'll just wing it. And but I'm like, practice? I got to practice one. And one of them is to show, is to model how we can all do more practicing as Unitarian Universalists. Because I think it's kind of a something where, because of our pluralism, sometimes we can kind of say, well, it kind of just life is practice, life, everything is. But there's an intentionality that I think Judson naturally brings to his way of being in life, and like a gentle intensity, I would say. It's a nonviolent intensity to the idea of practice that I think is actually very alluring, like to say, I want to try that. What is my practice, you know? And we went over a couple weeks ago, right after he got here, to the Tibetan Mongolian Buddhist Cultural Center in Bloomington. And I hadn't been there, and I've lived here 8 years. And I was like, Judson, I should take you there. Like I go there all the time? It's like, no, it's like, yes, let me show you my friends. But we sat for it was only like 5 minutes. It was like sitting in proximity to someone who might do that kind of thing more than I do, gave me more permission to practice. And regardless of the modality of practice, I really hope that we can kind of spend these next couple of years really engaging in the idea of what are the practices of Unitarian Universalism.
Yeah, I think that would be especially fun. So coming in the future, you may see me offering some meditation time, some introduction to meditation for folks who, have never engaged it and these sort of things. And that's sort of selfish too. It's by design to help me, be accountable to a regular sitting practice. So
I've never done that.
I can
Anything
do.
selfish. Why don't you go now? Yeah.
Yeah. So next one, I guess, I'm really, so this internship came together really quickly. I'm studying at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, doing a master's in divinity towards ordination here in the Unitarian Universalist tradition. And I had set up an internship for myself in New England, in Vermont. And I was going to do this Buddhist thing where I was working with this Zen group, and then I was going to be working with a Unitarian church nearby, and then I'd set the whole thing up, and it was my perfect plan. And then a colleague heard me speaking about intercultural and interfaith work, and that's sort of a passion of mine, and heard me talking about this in class, and she said, you need to speak to Nic Cable, because they're doing this really incredible interfaith work and intercultural work in Columbus, Indiana. And I was like, Columbus, Indiana? Really? And she said, no, just call Nic and talk to him. And so I scheduled a call with Nic, and we were supposed to talk for 30 minutes, and we ended up talking for a couple of hours. And it was like, oh man, this is really exciting what's happening here in Columbus with UUCCI and its interfaith efforts and intercultural efforts. And so he explained to me the Hindu temple and everything, and then I told him about my history in Sweden doing interfaith work, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, every other day we got on the phone and we're talking for another, my wife is like, who are you talking to? This like, because we were just, it was sparks immediately, a really good fit. And as that was happening, the internship in Vermont just started to wither. It was the weirdest thing, just like it all kind of fell apart, like. And my mom used to have a phrase for when things fall into place without you trying to make it happen. She said, that's a God thing. And I know we all have different opinions on higher power and not, and I don't have a dog in that fight, but it was a God thing. It just happened. It fell into my lap. So what I really want to do is help support this congregation in whatever way I can with the resource that I am towards growing itself and growing this idea of the interfaith campus. That's something that's really exciting to me, and I think super important for the time we're living in.
I appreciate all of that, and it was quite a profound kind of synchronicity. And one thing I would say about that is I want us in these next 2 years to really allow Judson's gifts to be shared with us and his lived experience, and for us to share our experiences and our gifts with Judson. So Judson comes with very unique experiences and background, and for us to not create like a cookie cutter internship where there is a generalist nature to an internship, but there's also gifts that any intern will naturally have. So during my internship or someone else's internship, every minister has to do an internship, and so to become credentialed in Unitarian Universalism. And so what are those unique gifts that we can bring out? And I do think some of the interfaith, intercultural, peace building, bridge building work is something that could really help us to take this work to the next stage.
Okay, two more. Next goal. This is a new one for me, but it's something that's always nagging at sort of the back of my consciousness. I'd like to explore a couple things. Pastoral counseling is something I'm interested in, and this is sort of the blending of like counseling like you would see in mental health counseling and pastoral care, because I see those two things as closely linked, but separate. So I'm interested in exploring that field of pastoral counseling, which is where you kind of blend those two things. And I'm also interested in getting some training, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to do this yet. We haven't really talked about it so much, but towards first responder chaplaincy, because there's so much crisis that bubbles up in the world, and oftentimes, folks, I think, need support in doing meaning making when they're in the midst of crisis, because sometimes crisis can make us feel like all is lost, like there's no hope, like the higher powers of the goodness of the universe has forgotten us, and how do we make sense of times that seem senseless? So I'm interested in those two things.
That's great. And I would say for us, or for me, one of my hopes seeing that is to just recognize the tremendous benefits of investing in an intern and being an internship location. Because regardless of whether first responder pastoral care training is ever deployed on us here, to know that Judson is out in the world after the internship doing that work is a tether back to us and back into those investments that we made. My internship supervisors, again, who both passed away tragically a couple years after I ended with them, they've been internship supervisors for probably 30 or 40 ministers that are still, most of them still serving. And they're all over the country and even the world. And that congregation or congregations that they've served, when that happens, they feel a deep sense of pride and connection. Not just because, we used to spend time with that person, but we invested in that person. We were a part of that person's formation. And I think that that's critical. And if we start leaning into that, then I think it really can bloom from there.
And the last one seems like a sort of foregone conclusion, but it's really to develop confidence in my capacity as a minister. I've been an actor for the last 30 years. That was my first career. So I can portray confidence. I can portray confidence. And that's actually, there's a bit of fake it till you make it there, right? There's portraying confidence is confidence building. But there's something deeper that I think I'm searching for and it's part of in this type of training. You'll hear the words formation used, or ministerial formation, and that's kind of the process of going from being Judson the actor, the head of this one career, to being Judson the minister, that formation. And so that process is always kind of like turbulent and squirrely and like full of doubt and, am I doing it right? And I'm making mistakes and all the stuff that we go through when we're trying to learn a new thing. So developing that kind of grounded confidence in my capacities as a minister is like top of the list.
Well, you're just setting me up nicely. I mean, I think confidence, he didn't show me these. Confidence, I think, is a great one, because I think in this world we're living in, it's not just in the role as a minister that we need to be confident, but it's in our collective congregational confidence in the work that we're doing. To be a beacon for diverse religious thought and courageous action, to be a community of hope and courage where we celebrate love and work for justice, that requires confidence. That requires boldness. That requires connection where we support one another and find our collective courage in each other and in our partners on the Interfaith campus and outside the campus, and in all our loved ones and our loving communities that we're a part of. So I really do hope and believe in this deep intersection of connection between the intern and the internship location, the minister and the ministry, that we can all reap the benefits of mutual learning, mutual formation or transformation. So I have deep hopes that coming out of this and emergently throughout, we are finding more and more courage to keep moving forward. I'm excited to keep this conversation going and slowly but surely bringing you all in to the conversation as well. And this next part, because we have to frame it up some way, or who knows what will happen, we wrote a simple question, but not so simple question of, what's it going to take? What's it going to take for all those hopes and dreams, all those goals? What's it going to take for us to actually 2 years from now be able to look back and say, we did it, or we did some of it, or we did things we didn't even know we would need to do to get to where we are today. But what's it going to take? As broad as that question is, What comes to mind for you, Judson, when I ask, what's it going to take?
First answer that comes to mind is I wrote, keep drinking from the fire hose. Because that's how this is for me right now. It's a lot of new, everything new. New. Keep being new. Keep making mistakes. Keep showing up. Keep lending a hand wherever I can. There's a little Swedish saying that I like. It's 3 words. Titta, lyssna, repetira. Look, listen, repeat. So that's the first thing.
I love that. And I've actually been smirking every time I hear him, off talking to someone about drinking from the fire hose, and he's like, yeah, I'm still just kind of new, drinking from the fire hose, and like little do I want to tell him is that pressure doesn't change. I went to the internship of Fire Hose, the UU Church of Fire Hose, St. Paul, Minnesota. Yeah, so.
Thanks. That you just told me now whether I'm going to be in congregational ministry or not.
No, you can do it. You can do it. See, once you learn that level of hydration, that level of drinking from the fire hose, life changes. I mean, it really does. You start getting some endurance, and you start slowing down. It's like the Matrix, like the watching the bullet come by, and stuff. You just learn how to live in that space. But in fact, I also think that can be a great learning environment, because as much as there are fire hose moments, there's also these moments one-on-one where we can debrief a meeting and slow down and really talk and listen and offer questions and feedback and insights mutually, right? It's not just like I sit up higher and he's at my feet. Like we're both learning from each other, and the same with staff and the same with members of the congregation and the board. So it can be a deep learning environment, but there's also the modulation of intensity that naturally comes between the sharing and the deep breathing, for example, that we just modeled. What else were you thinking?
Yeah, and this kind of goes along with that. It really, I was really reflecting on the quality of being new, and the quality of being willing to risk not being good at something. And that's a really interesting space for me personally. I stayed in the performing arts for 30 years for a number of reasons. One was because I was good at it, and I was comfortable there, and I enjoyed it, and people responded well, and I enjoyed it, and I felt safe and comfortable there. There was a sort of a stubbornness also to staying in the performing arts for so long. There was sort of a boldness to being unwilling to let go of being an artist, which I don't think I will ever let go of. It's like being a musician. Once you're a musician, you're a musician, and once you're an artist for life, really. But I held on to that for a long time, and now I'm in a new space, and I was reflecting. I'll just say this little piece that on this. There's a little video, you can find it on the internet. It's David Bowie is talking about. He's talking about playing for the audience, and what he means by playing for the audience is sort of playing it safe, continuing to do the same thing that's the hit over and over again. And he says that when artists play for the audience, he says he thinks they don't do really great work there. He says what he wants to see is the artist step out into the deep end of the pool or the deep end of the water where their feet are, he uses this metaphor, where their feet are barely touching the bottom, where they're really not quite sure if they can do it or what's next or how to do it. He said that place of kind of intentional precariousness, this is a place where real creativity happens. And so that's really the piece that I'm kind of living in right now. It's because, man, my feet are barely touching the bottom in a lot of this stuff, but it's where the creativity is rising. Absolutely,
and I love that idea of having a beginner's mind, a new being willing to make mistakes, or even just like allowing that newness to be like, I'm going to keep making mistakes, and like, good, give yourself permission. Who said we were looking for a perfect intern or perfect congregants or a perfect minister or perfect musicians or perfect anything, right? We're looking for humanity and in one another. So by modeling that and by us practicing that, because it is a practice of imperfection, I think we can get better at actually taking risks, because what the world needs is more risk-taking right now, okay? It's so easy to say we need to fortify, we need to hunker down, and there are very legitimate reasons for certain fortifications of certain communities. And we need new models of community, new models of justice work, new models of being in diversity and building a community that really is safer and stronger than what we currently have. So I love that. And then the last piece that I just wanted to respond to something you said, which I thought was really good, was not playing for the audience, but playing for a broader listening, a thing that is far beyond those who are in the room. And I think that as a congregation, what it's going to take is for us to remember that we are here because of people who came before us, and we are here for us and for them, and also for those who we can never imagine who will come after us and in these times to come. So you're playing not just for the congregation that is today, or building or investing or any of these kinds of initiatives. We are doing that for a much larger living, unfolding story that is Unitarian Universalism, UUCCI, and our common humanity. You have other things that you'd like to add to what's it going to take?
There's one last one, which was in terms of what will it take, what's it going to take to do these things. It has to do with continuing to learn how to practice healthy leadership, which really is I think something that isn't just about people who are culturally designated as leaders in some way, but it's for everybody. And for me, one of the tensions that I find in my own leadership, I was always an independent actor and theater maker, so I was always, starting a new theater company, writing a play, shooting a film, just going and doing it, And for a long time, that sort of boldness in front, nobody's doing it, I'm going to do it. That was my leadership style. And it's taken me some time to learn that leadership is about, really, for me anyway, this is maybe just my personal lesson, but for me it's about learning when to step out in front and when to step back, and let other people be in front. And so sort of navigating that is an important piece. When to reach out, when to wait for others to reach out to me, when to push, and when not to push, when it's time to just hold the space. These are the things I'm sort of working with conceptually as leader, so yeah.
And I guess I would just add one more thing too, and that I think I can go off of leadership too, which is it's time for us to lead. It's time for us to be bold. It's time for us to really think about, is what we're imagining really that much better than we currently are in? Or are we thinking about something, about a way of doing community, of doing an interfaith campus, of being a multicultural, multi-faith society that actually is asking something of us? I think it's so easy to live vicariously through the leadership or courage of others. We do that. I do that with others in the world. And now it's trying to find that inner fire within us to all be a part of it. And that's going to look different. It's not always out front. It's sometimes like being that ember of warmth and fire that keeps a community inclusive and welcoming and hospitable. And it's about working with our children and making sure we're cultivating young and emerging adults who are going to be the next generation of leaders in our society. So I think so much of what I'm thinking is it going to take is it's us kind of getting off of a kind of am I in or am I out double Dutch thing, and really like getting in there and really starting to make some waves. So I want to hear from all of you. We could talk all day. We talk all day, all the time. And I think this is an opportunity for us to actually hear from each other. We have another mic. Missy, thank you, is going to be able to walk it around. This is an opportunity to ask questions, say anything clarifying or just something completely different, or make a comment of something that you want to say based on what we're talking about. But we hope to hear from a few people. And if you could say your name, that's just a good way for us to get to know each other a little bit better.
Hi, I'm Candace. I just want to say thank you for being here. You were needed, and we appreciate you, and you had to step away from family and your pets, and we know you miss them, but we're glad you're here.
Thanks, Candace. Thank you so much.
Jim Farless. Thursday night, Lynette and I went over to IU to listen to Pete Buttigieg, and the question was, how do you talk to somebody who has very different views than you do, especially politically? And he said, my little secret is I think about a friend of mine who lives in South Bend, Indiana, and has different views than I do. But I know he's a friend, so I'm going to speak to him and try to talk with him as a friend. Do you have any strategies that you use when you reach out to try to talk to somebody who has politically different views than yourself?
One of the things I try to do when I'm connecting with folks who are politically different than me is I usually initially avoid politics altogether. I just don't even get in there at first. I look for a conversation that's a mutual interest. And if it's possible, if the situation calls for it, I've done had some experience in formal situations where people who are in polarized political arenas are coming to encounter one another. And in those situations, we always built those situations where we would do a lot of sharing of our human stuff. What we, like, what food do we like? What's your favorite this or that? I try to get into a conversation about shared humanity first, because we all have a favorite this or that. And we're all experts on one thing, and we're all experts on our own story. Everybody that I disagree with has a past. They have a history. They have a people that they love. They have someone who they knew that died. They have somebody who was just born. They have something they were grateful for. They have these kinds of topics are where I tend to go first, to really try to connect with a person's humanity. Because even though people, I may sharply disagree with them, and maybe their beliefs are doing great harm, they still are human beings, and they have had a human life. Similar, they were born, they're all going to die, just like me, just like everybody. So there is a way, I think, so that's where I focus first before I start getting into the political.
And for me, whether this is something you want to do or not is for you to decide, is I try to look for the pain and suffering underneath the person I'm meeting. To acknowledge that they have experienced pain and suffering, trauma, however defined, and to not allow that to allow them to do harm to me or those I love, but to acknowledge that in my heart that this person is also hurting in some way, acknowledged or often not acknowledged, and that fear that exists in there makes anyone put up walls. We all put up walls. And so a part of bridge building work is to build that trust, like with like an animal that has been lost their trust in people, to bring that wall down and to build that. And that is a very slow process. And so without it being like, well, I'm safe and you're the one that's been hurt, to say, I'm also hurt. And I'm not, and we're both trying to bring those walls down. Again, it's so contextual to whatever the conversation is, but I do think trying to think a little bit about how do we factor in questions of pain and suffering and trauma is, I think, helpful.
We're not gonna change people by forcing them to change any more than someone who wants to force us to change is going to force us to change. It doesn't work that way. It works by modeling.
I have a question.
Go on, Missy.
So coming back to American food after 14 years, was that a good or bad thing for you?
That's a mixed bag, actually. It's like anything. It's always pluses and minuses. There's things I miss about Sweden, and there's things I missed when I was there. You can't get decent Mexican food anywhere in Sweden. And you've got plenty of good Mexican joints around here. I grew up in West Texas, so, I need a good Mexican joint. And then, there's also like just the massive overwhelm of corporate mediocrity that is oftentimes American food. But that's not all it is, You also can't get a good beefsteak in Sweden. I know that we all have probably different opinions on red meat, but you can take the boy out of Texas, but it's hard to take the Texan out of the boy. Right. And I'll still enjoy a good steak. So, yeah.
Any other questions or comments anyone wants to make? Yep. Why don't we end with Dick?
You mentioned not-for-profits. Are you interested in trying to go ahead and work with any in the Columbus area?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Very interested. I'm interested in nonprofits. I have a nonprofit, actually. It's not active right now, but it is a 501c3 that a partner of mine and I developed to help do intercultural work through film. And so, yeah, I'm very interested in nonprofit. Yes, and that's kind of part of the bucket list or not really the bucket list, but the list of things. I'm going to join the local NAACP chapter, and I want to get more involved. It really literally is like just about time and ticking down the list of the 1,000. It's the fire hose. I'm telling you, it's like there's a lot to do, but yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you, Judson, and thank everyone for being deep listeners, because that's also something we're practicing is listening, leaning in, and then again, allowing that to be a dialogue within ourselves and with those around us today and in the days to come. So let's just take a little moment to allow the music to settle us into our closing time.